There once lived an old man in a quiet village. He had 3 daughters. 2 of them he loved dearly, but the firstborn he despised. For reasons only known to his hardened heart, he treated her with coldness and scorn. Their mother, however, loved all her children equally. To her, no daughter was greater than the other. She spoke often of love, of fairness, of patience, but her words could not soften her husband's heart. The old man had one dream. He wanted his daughters to marry rich men so he could boast of wealth and status. But life does not always follow the path that pride demands. One day, the daughter he hated was deceived. A man took advantage of her innocence, leaving her with a child. When her father discovered her pregnancy, his anger burned like fire. He called her cursed, a disgrace to his name, and without mercy he cast her out of his home. Alone, rejected, and heavy with sorrow, she walked into the night. She carried not only her shame, but also the life growing inside her. With trembling hands, she found work as a cleaner, scrubbing floors by day and crying herself to sleep by night. Months passed, and then came the day of her labor. To the amazement of all, she did not give birth to 1 child, but 3 strong, healthy boys. Triplets. The very daughter her father despised was now the mother of sons, something he had long wished for but never received from his beloved daughters. Mary's life was a storm of hardship. The man who fathered her children had denied her, and every coin she earned from cleaning barely put food on the table for her 3 little boys. Yet she kept going. Her hands blistered from scrubbing, her back ached from bending, but she refused to let her children suffer. She was their mother, their shield, their hope. 1 year later, fate stirred in an unexpected way. A wealthy businessman travelled all the way from Abuja for a major proposal at the company where Mary worked as a cleaner. He was no ordinary man. His name carried weight, his presence commanded respect. During the meeting, as the secretary tried to serve him coffee, her hands shook and the cup tipped. Hot coffee spilled across his fine shirt, leaving an ugly stain. The room fell silent. Mary, watching from the window as she wiped down a corridor, felt something she couldn't explain. A quiet voice inside her heart whispered, "Do something." Without thinking twice, she ran out of the building, crossed the busy street, and rushed into a boutique nearby. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the little money she had saved, money meant for her children's food. But instead of bread, she bought an expensive shirt for a stranger. As she hurried back, a thought flashed in her mind. What have I done? I barely feed my boys, and here I am buying a rich man a shirt. Yet she carried it with determination, whispering to herself, "Goodness has its way of working good things out." She handed the shirt to the secretary, who nervously gave it to the businessman. The man looked at the shirt, then at the secretary, confused. "Who bought this?" he asked. The secretary pointed toward Mary, who stood quietly by the doorway, her head slightly bowed. The businessman's eyes lingered on her, and in that moment, something shifted. As Mr. Anthony prepared to leave for the airport that first day, he made sure to find Mary. He walked straight to her corner, stretched out his hand, and said softly, "Thank you." His voice carried both gratitude and curiosity. Before stepping into his car, he asked for her number. Mary hesitated for a moment, then scribbled it down. He left, and with him went the memory of that little act of kindness. Mary, though poor, was filled with joy that day. She smiled to herself as she walked back to her cleaning post. At least I was able to help, she thought. She never expected anything more. Months passed, life returned to its daily struggles. Mary had almost forgotten the entire incident. Then, one quiet Sunday morning, as she bent over a basin, washing her children's clothes, her phone began to ring. She wiped her wet hands on her wrapper and picked it up. "Hello," she said softly. A familiar voice replied, "It's me, Mr. Anthony, the man you bought a new shirt for." Mary froze. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Mr. Anthony continued, "I am in town now. Would it be okay if we meet? I have something for you." Mary's heart raced. She didn't know whether to say yes or no. Her lips trembled, but somehow she found the courage to whisper, "Okay, sir." "Where can I meet you?" They agreed on a small spot behind the office. When Mary arrived, she saw Mr. Anthony already waiting. He welcomed her warmly, his eyes filled with the same curiosity he had shown months ago. They spoke at length. Once again, he thanked her sincerely, saying, "Not many people would do what you did." Then, gently, he asked, "Tell me, what is your educational background?" Mary's eyes grew heavy with tears. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. Slowly, painfully, she poured out her heart. She told him the story of her life, the hatred of her father, the rejection, the man who abandoned her, and how she now carried the burden of raising 3 sons alone. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she spoke. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Mr. Anthony listened, his face moved with compassion. Mr. Anthony sat quietly for a while after hearing Mary's story. His eyes softened, and then he spoke in a steady voice. "Mary," he said, "life has been cruel to you, but I believe your goodness that day was not by chance. It was a seed you planted, and I will not let that seed die." Mary lifted her eyes, confused. Mr. Anthony leaned forward. "I am a widower," he continued. "My wife is gone, and I have only one daughter. From today, I promise you, your 3 sons will be mine too. I will see them through school all the way to the university until they can stand on their own." Mary gasped, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. She wanted to speak, but words failed her. For the first time in years, her heart felt light, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. From that day forward, Mr. Anthony became more than a benefactor. He became family. He stood by his word, paying their school fees, providing their needs, and guiding them as though they were his own flesh and blood. Years rolled by like the turning of pages. Mary's boys grew strong, wise, and determined. Their mother never stopped praying for them, never stopped reminding them of the grace that had found them. 22 years later, the triplets were no longer little boys. They were fine young men, each with his own strength, each with a future shining before him. Mr. Anthony, now older and gentler, looked at them with pride. To him, they were not just boys he had helped, they were his sons. He placed each one of them in different companies he owned in Abuja, setting them on paths of success. His only daughter welcomed them as her brothers, and together they became one family, bound not by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and destiny. One quiet evening, as Mary prepared dinner for her sons, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was her mother. She hadn't been home ever since the night her father threw her out, and the sound of her mother's voice carried both warmth and old memories. "My daughter," her mother said gently, "how are you?" "How are the boys?" Mary smiled faintly, holding back her emotions. "We are good, Mama. The boys are fine. And you, Mama? How is Dad?" For a moment, silence fell on the line. Her mother's voice slowed, heavy with unspoken words. "Mary, I just called to let you know, your father's 70th birthday is next week. He has already called your sisters, but he did not call you, so I said I should call you myself." Mary's eyes welled up. Her hand shook slightly as she pressed the phone to her ear. Tears almost escaped, but she quickly brushed them away. Her sons, now grown men, had become CEOs under Mr. Anthony's guidance, a truth her mother did not yet know. She straightened her shoulders, drew in a deep breath and whispered, "I will be there, Mama." Her mother exhaled with relief. "Thank you, my child." "That is all I wanted to hear." Mary ended the call and sat still for a while. The memories of rejection tried to rise again, but she wiped her face, smiled softly, and looked up toward heaven. "This time," she thought, "I will not return in shame. I will return in strength. 5 days before the grand celebration, Mary sat quietly in her living room and picked up her phone. She dialed her sons, one after the other. Her voice was gentle, yet steady. "My sons," she said, "your grandfather's birthday is coming. He is turning 70. I want us to go together." The triplets listened in silence, then answered with one voice of reassurance. "Mama, we will be there, and we will not go empty-handed. We will get you the finest, most expensive wine to give him as your gift." Mary smiled through her tears. These were the same boys she had raised in pain and rejection, now speaking with the confidence of men who had conquered life. Meanwhile, Martha and Mercy, the old man's beloved daughters, were already preparing. With the support of their husbands, they had purchased their father's favorite drink, proudly wrapping it and setting it aside for the big day. At last, the birthday arrived. The compound was filled with people, family, friends, neighbors, and elders from the village. The sound of laughter mixed with drums and voices singing, "Happy Birthday!" Martha and Mercy walked in with their husbands, their heads high, their father smiling widely at their arrival. The old man's pride glowed in his eyes as he embraced them warmly. Inside the kitchen, Mary's mother moved about anxiously, stirring pots and arranging dishes. Yet, in her heart, she carried a secret worry. Would Mary truly come? Would she show her face after all these years? She sighed deeply as she wiped her hands on her wrapper. My poor daughter, she thought. She must still be struggling somewhere with those boys. What she did not know was that Mary's sons were no longer struggling boys. They were men of power, CEOs, who now stood tall in the city of Abuja. And on this day, they were about to walk into the very compound that once rejected their mother. Mary decided to go alone. She chose no chauffeur, no flashy car, no jewelry. She wore a simple gown, faded from years of use, and tied a wrapper around her waist. In her hand, she carried a small black nylon bag with just one bottle of wine. When she stepped into her father's compound, 25 years had already passed since the night he threw her out. The crowd turned their heads. Some whispered, some stared, others laughed quietly. Her mother's eyes filled with tears of joy the moment she saw her. She rushed forward, embracing Mary tightly, as though she was afraid to ever let go again. "My daughter, you came," she whispered, her voice trembling. But her siblings, Martha and Mercy, looked at her coldly, their noses raised. To them she was no sister, only a shadow of shame. Their father sat in his chair like a king, surrounded by guests. When Mary bent low to greet him, he did not respond. He shifted his face away, as if her presence was an insult. The air grew heavy. The whispers grew louder. The weight of poverty and rejection pressed against Mary's heart. Yet she stood silently, clutching the nylon bag in her hand. Then came the moment of honor. Gift presentation. Martha, the second daughter, stood proudly. With a smile, she walked to the table and placed an expensive bottle of wine wrapped in golden foil. Guests clapped in admiration. Mercy, the last daughter, followed next. She too brought out her father's favorite wine, carefully decorated it, and laid it on the table. Applause filled the air once again. Their father nodded with pride. Now, it was Mary's turn. The compound fell silent, all eyes fixed on her. Some smirked, others whispered. They waited, expecting to laugh at whatever cheap gift she had brought. Mary stepped forward slowly, her nylon bag crinkling in her hand. She placed it gently on the table, then pulled out a single bottle of wine. But just as she set it down, something unimaginable happened. The moment was tense. Guests leaned forward, eyes fixed on the table, waiting for the machine to reveal the truth. Please, your support means a lot to us. Do well to hit the subscribe button if you haven't, like, share, and comment your thoughts on this video. Back to the story first, Martha's wine was placed on the tester. The number flashed $350. Gasps filled the air. The guests clapped loudly, and the old man's chest swelled with pride. He glanced at Martha and nodded with approval. Then came Mercy's turn. Her husband handed over the bottle and the machine beeped. $450. The crowd roared even louder. Guests rose to their feet, applauding. Mercy smiled proudly, shooting her elder sister a mocking glance. Now all eyes turned to Mary. She slowly pulled out her bottle of wine, its wrapper looking cheap and ordinary. Some guests chuckled, others whispered. Her father's face twisted with disgust. He slapped her across the cheek before she could even set it down. "Why have you chosen to disgrace me among my guests?" he barked. Mary's cheek burned with pain, but her spirit stood firm. She held up the bottle and urged, "Test it. Let the truth speak." Martha stepped close, her lips curling. "You already know your wine is worthless. Why don't you respect yourself?" Mary's eyes locked on hers. Calmly, she replied, "And what if my wine is more expensive than yours?" Martha laughed mockingly. "If it is, I will kneel before you and do anything you want." The wine tester took the bottle, shaking his head. He placed it on the machine. A second later, the result flashed. $2,500. The courtyard erupted. Guests screamed in shock, some hugging Mary, some shouting her name. Her mother's face lit up with the sweetest smile in years. Martha and Mercy's smiles melted into shame. The old man sat frozen, his eyes wide, his pride shattered. And then it happened. The sound of roaring engines filled the compound. 3 sleek, flashy cars swept in, followed by an entourage. The crowd turned, doors opened, and out stepped 3 tall young men in fine suits, Jason, Jackson, and Johnson, the triplets, Mary's sons. The guests gasped. The old man's jaw dropped. These were the same boys he once called good for nothing. The triplets walked straight to the high table. Without a word, they placed a briefcase full of crisp dollars beside their grandfather, along with bottles of rare, expensive wine. The old man's mouth moved, but no words came out. He had lost his voice in the face of truth. Then the young men turned to their grandmother, bowed respectfully, and handed her gifts wrapped in gold. "Thank you, Grandma," they said, "for loving our mother when no one else did." The courtyard shook with cheers. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, praising, whispering in awe. At that moment, everyone knew Mary was no longer the poor, rejected daughter. She was the mother of kings. Minutes later, the Triple J's stepped back into their cars and drove away, leaving behind a trail of wonder. Mary, her heart steady, turned to her mother. "Mama, I will be leaving shortly." But her mother held her hand tightly. "No, my daughter. Please stay. Let us sit together as a family tonight. We have much to discuss." Mary paused, looking at her sisters' pale faces, at her father's silence, at her mother's pleading eyes. She took a deep breath and nodded gently. "All right, Mama. For you, I will stay." That night, for the first time in 25 years, they all sat together as a family. The air was heavy with silence until Martha and Mercy suddenly rose from their seats. With trembling voices, they dropped to their knees before Mary. "Sister, please, forgive us," they cried, their heads bowed in shame. Mary's chest tightened. She remembered the years of mockery, the pain, the humiliation. She looked at them, but her heart struggled. The scars they had given her ran deep. Then their father stood as well. The same man who once rejected her now shifted uneasily by her side. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Mary, forgive me. I was blind. I was wrong." For a moment, Mary said nothing, her fists clenched on her knees, her tears falling silently. And then her mother reached out, held her hand tightly, and looked into her eyes. "My daughter," she said softly, "for me, let it go." Mary's chest rose and fell. Slowly she breathed out and wiped her tears. "Because of you, Mama, I forgive them. The past is gone." The room released a sigh of relief. Her sisters wept openly. Her father bent his head low. The next morning, as the sun spilled through the curtains, Mary dressed to leave. She walked to her father, her steps steady. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out a small white card and placed it in his trembling hands. He opened it, his eyes widening as he read, "Wedding invitation. Mary and Mr. Anthony." Her father's lips parted in shock. Mary smiled gently. "In 1 month's time, I will be marrying Mr. Anthony." Gasps filled the room. Her sisters covered their mouths. Her mother let out a joyful laugh, her eyes shining with pride. None of them had imagined that Mary, the despised daughter, was about to become the wife of a billionaire. In that moment, the family embraced, their broken ties mended. Mary's sisters had learned their lesson. Never despise the one who seems small, for tomorrow may lift them higher than you can ever imagine. Closing moral. The story of Mary reminds us that rejection is not the end, and pain is not permanent. Life can turn around in ways we least expect. Always walk in kindness, always keep your faith, for the stone that the builders rejected can truly become the cornerstone.